The June sun blazed down on the university's main courtyard, where hundreds of families gathered for the College of Engineering's graduation ceremony. White folding chairs stretched across the manicured lawn in perfect rows, filled with proud parents clutching cameras and bouquets. The air hummed with excitement, graduation caps glinting in the afternoon light, and the sound of nervous laughter mixing with the distant hum of air conditioning units working overtime in the administrative buildings that surrounded the ceremony space. I stood at the edge of the crowd, smoothing down my simple navy dress from Target, the same one I'd worn to job interviews and scholarship meetings for the past 2 years. The fabric was polyester, not silk, and the hem had been carefully mended where I'd caught it on a laboratory stool. My graduation cap sat slightly askew on my head, secured with bobby pins I'd borrowed from my roommate since I couldn't afford the fancy graduation accessories my classmates had ordered online. "You look fine, sweetheart," I whispered to myself, the same words I'd been repeating for months whenever doubt crept in. But as I spotted my family walking across the lawn, my confidence wavered like heat shimmer on asphalt. Mom strutted toward me in her new designer heels, Louboutin pumps she'd bought specifically for this day, their red soles flashing with each step like warning signals. Her Chanel suit was pristine white, probably costing more than I'd spent on textbooks for my entire degree. Dad walked beside her in his custom-tailored gray suit, his Rolex catching the sunlight as he checked the time with obvious impatience. Behind them, my older brother Marcus strolled casually in his expensive polo shirt and designer jeans, his law degree from an Ivy League school having earned him permanent golden child status in our family hierarchy. "There she is," Mom announced as they approached, her voice carrying that particular tone she reserved for disappointments. "Our little graduate." The pause before graduate spoke volumes. She looked me up and down with the practiced eye of someone who'd spent years in country club social circles, her gaze lingering disapprovingly on my modest dress, my simple flat shoes and my drugstore makeup. "Jesus, Maya," Dad said, not even bothering to lower his voice as other families milled around us. "Couldn't you have at least tried to look presentable? This is supposed to be a celebration." He gestured vaguely at my outfit while pulling out his phone, already distracted by whatever stock alerts or business emails demanded his attention. Marcus smirked, leaning against a nearby tree with his arms crossed. "At least she's finally done with this whole phase," he said, making air quotes around the word phase, as if my 4 years of intensive biomedical engineering study had been some kind of rebellious hobby. "Maybe now she can get a real job and start contributing to the family for once." The words stung, but I'd learned to expect them. For 4 years, every family dinner had included commentary about my worthless degree, my unrealistic dreams, and my waste of potential. While Marcus had been fast-tracked through law school with full parental funding, I'd worked 3 part-time jobs to pay for my education, tutoring underclassmen in mathematics, grading papers for professors and spending weekends cleaning laboratory equipment. "We're sitting in the family section," Mom informed me, pointing toward a cluster of chairs near the front of the ceremony area. "Try not to trip on that dress when they call your name. And for God's sake smile. People are watching." She adjusted her pearl necklace, a gift from Dad for their last anniversary, and checked her reflection in her phone screen. As we made our way to our seats, I caught fragments of conversations from other families around us. Parents beaming with pride talking about job offers and graduate school acceptances. Grandparents wiping away tears of joy. Siblings planning celebration dinners. The contrast with my own family's energy felt stark, like watching a movie about someone else's life. "At least this engineering nonsense is finally over," Dad muttered to Mom as they settled into their chairs. "Maybe now she'll consider something practical. Marcus knows people at his firm. They might have an opening for a paralegal or something entry-level. Or she could finally get married," Mom added hopefully. "That nice boy from the country club, Jonathan, just finished his MBA. His father owns 3 car dealerships." She spoke about me in third person despite sitting just 2 seats away, as if I were an abstract problem to be solved rather than their daughter about to graduate summa cum laude from one of the nation's top engineering programs. The ceremony began with the usual pageantry. The processional march, the dean's welcome speech, the valedictorian's address about launching into the future. I tried to focus on the moment, to feel proud of what I'd accomplished despite my family's constant dismissal. 4 years of 16-hour days, countless nights in the laboratory, research projects that had pushed the boundaries of my understanding. My professors had called my work groundbreaking. My thesis advisor had submitted my research to international journals. But none of that seemed to matter to the people who were supposed to love and support me unconditionally. How much longer is this going to take? Marcus complained, checking his Apple Watch, a graduation gift from our parents when he'd finished law school. I have dinner plans at 8. Shoo, Mom hissed, though she was clearly bored too. We have to at least pretend to care. She waved at another family across the seating area, flashing her practiced social smile before returning to her natural expression of mild annoyance. Dean Morrison took the podium as the individual degree presentations began. One by one, students walked across the stage to receive their diplomas, their families cheering and taking pictures. When the engineering students were called, I felt my heart rate increase. This was it, the moment I'd worked toward for 4 years, despite every obstacle and discouragement. Maya Rodriguez, the dean called, and I stood on shaking legs. As I walked toward the stage, I heard Mom whisper to Dad, "At least she didn't fall down." The comment was meant to be quiet, but it carried in the afternoon air, causing a few nearby families to turn and look at us with confused expressions. I climbed the steps to the stage, my target dress feeling suddenly lighter, my borrowed bobby pins holding my cap perfectly in place. Dean Morrison smiled warmly as he handed me my diploma. The piece of paper that represented 4 years of sacrifice, determination, and sleepless nights. The document felt substantial in my hands, heavier than I'd expected, as if it carried the weight of all my future possibilities. "Congratulations, Maya," he said quietly, his voice full of genuine warmth. "I hope you know how proud we all are of your work." His words meant more to me than any praise I'd ever received from my family. This man, who barely knew me personally, understood the significance of this moment in ways my own parents couldn't seem to grasp. I walked back to my seat, diploma in hand, expecting the ceremony to continue with the next student. But Dean Morrison remained at the podium, clearing his throat to address the crowd. "Before we continue," he announced, his voice carrying across the courtyard through the microphone system, "I have a special announcement to make regarding this year's Outstanding Research Achievement Award." My stomach dropped. I'd forgotten about the Research Awards ceremony that typically followed graduation. Several students each year received recognition for exceptional work, usually accompanied by small grants or scholarship money for graduate school. I'd submitted my research on biocompatible neural interfaces months ago, but with everything else going on, it had slipped my mind entirely. This year's recipient has developed revolutionary technology in the field of biomedical engineering, Dean Morrison continued, his voice growing more enthusiastic. Their research on neural interface systems has attracted attention from major medical device companies and research institutions across the country. I felt my parents shifting uncomfortably in their seats beside me. Dad was still checking his phone, probably reading emails about some real estate deal. Mom was touching up her lipstick using her phone's camera, preparing for the post-ceremony photos she'd inevitably post on social media to show her friends how supportive she was. The recipient of this year's Outstanding Research Achievement Award, along with a $2 million research grant for continued development, is $2 million. The number seemed to echo in my head like a bell. I'd known the research award existed, but I'd never imagined it came with funding of that magnitude. $2 million could fund years of research, could transform not just my future but potentially the lives of countless patients who might benefit from my neural interface technology. Maya Rodriguez. Time seemed to stop. The dean's words hung in the air like a physical presence, impossible to ignore or misinterpret. Around me, the crowd erupted in applause, but all I could hear was the sudden silence from my family's section. I turned to look at them, my diploma still clutched in my hands. Dad's phone had slipped from his grasp and fallen to the grass beneath his chair. His mouth hung open, his eyes wide with shock and confusion. Mom's lipstick had frozen halfway to her mouth, her hand suspended in midair as she stared at me with an expression I'd never seen before, something between bewilderment and dawning horror. Marcus had gone completely pale, his confident smirk replaced by a look of pure panic. The golden child who'd always been held up as the family success story suddenly looked very small and uncertain, as if the ground beneath his expensive shoes had shifted without warning. "Maya Rodriguez," Dean Morrison repeated, gesturing for me to return to the stage. "Please come forward to accept your award." The applause grew louder as I stood on trembling legs and walked back toward the stage. Other families were turning to look at mine, smiling and pointing, clearly expecting to see proud parents beaming with joy. Instead, they saw three people who looked like they'd been struck by lightning, frozen in place with expressions of absolute shock. As I climbed the steps to the stage for the second time, Dean Morrison's smile had grown even wider. "Maya," he said, speaking into the microphone so his words carried across the entire ceremony, "your research on biocompatible neural interfaces represents a breakthrough that could revolutionize treatment for spinal cord injuries, paralysis, and neurodegenerative diseases." The review committee was unanimous in their decision. He handed me a thick folder containing what I assumed were the grant documents and research agreements. The weight of it in my hands felt surreal, like holding my own future. $2 million for research that my family had dismissed as playing with computers and wires. "Can you tell our audience a bit about your work?" Dean Morrison asked, turning to face the crowd with obvious pride. I took a deep breath, steadying myself at the microphone. "For the past 3 years, I've been developing neural interface technology that allows direct communication between the brain and external devices," I began, my voice growing stronger with each word. "The applications range from helping paralyzed patients control robotic limbs to treating severe depression and PTSD through targeted neural stimulation." The crowd listened with rapt attention, but my eyes were fixed on my family. Dad had finally retrieved his phone from the grass, but his hands were shaking so badly he couldn't unlock the screen. Mom had dropped her lipstick entirely, her designer purse falling open and spilling its contents across her lap. Marcus was frantically Googling something on his phone, probably trying to understand what a $2 million research grant actually meant. "The technology has already attracted interest from 3 major medical device companies and 2 pharmaceutical corporations," I continued, feeling a strange sense of calm wash over me. "We've also received preliminary approval for human trials starting next year." When I finished speaking, the applause was thunderous. Students, faculty, and families throughout the courtyard were on their feet, celebrating not just my achievement but the potential impact of the research itself. I felt tears stinging my eyes as I looked out at hundreds of faces showing genuine pride and excitement for my work. But the faces that mattered most to me, the ones I'd spent my entire life trying to impress, looked like they'd seen a ghost. I walked back to my seat carrying both my diploma and the research grant documentation, feeling like I was floating above the ceremony rather than participating in it. The dean continued with the remaining awards and closing remarks, but I barely heard any of it. My mind was racing, processing the magnitude of what had just happened. $2 million. International recognition. Human trials. Job offers that would undoubtedly follow. Graduate school opportunities at the world's top research institutions. Everything I'd dreamed of but never quite believed was possible. As the ceremony concluded and families began to disperse, taking pictures and making dinner plans, my own family remained frozen in their seats. Other parents approached us, offering congratulations and asking about my research. Dad managed to nod and smile, but I could see the confusion and panic in his eyes as he tried to process how his worthless daughter had just received one of the most prestigious research awards in the country. "Excuse me," a woman in an expensive suit approached our group. "I'm Dr. Patricia Williams from Johns Hopkins. I was hoping to speak with Maya about potential collaboration opportunities." She handed me a business card with the Johns Hopkins Medical Institution logo embossed in gold. Behind her stood 2 more people, a man in a navy suit from MIT and a woman representing Stanford's bioengineering department. All 3 of them were looking at me with the kind of respect and admiration I'd never seen in my parents' eyes. "Maya," Dr. Williams continued, "your research has implications that could change the entire field of neuromedicine. We'd love to discuss graduate funding and laboratory access if you're interested in continuing your work at the doctoral level." "Full funding," the MIT representative added, "plus laboratory access, research assistant positions, and potential patent sharing agreements. This is exactly the kind of innovation we want to support." I looked at my family, who were listening to this conversation with growing horror. Mom's face had gone from pale to green, as if she might actually be sick. Dad kept opening and closing his mouth like a fish, unable to form coherent words. Marcus had put his phone away entirely and was staring at me as if seeing me for the first time. That's wonderful," Mom finally managed to say, her voice barely above a whisper. "We're so proud." The words sounded foreign in her mouth, like she was speaking a language she'd never learned. "Yes," Dad added quickly, trying to recover some semblance of parental pride. "Maya has always been brilliant. We always knew she'd accomplish great things." His voice cracked slightly on the word always, and I saw him glance around nervously to see if anyone had noticed his obvious discomfort. The representatives from Johns Hopkins, MIT, and Stanford exchanged business cards with me and scheduled follow-up meetings for the following week. As they walked away, discussing among themselves the potential applications of my research, my family and I stood in awkward silence on the rapidly emptying lawn. $2 million, Marcus finally said, his voice hollow. That's more than I made in my first 3 years at the firm combined. How did you? Mom started, then stopped, unable to finish the question. How did you hide this from us? How did you accomplish something this significant while we weren't paying attention? How did we miss the signs that our supposedly worthless daughter was developing world-changing technology? I tried to tell you, I said quietly, my voice steady despite the emotional tornado swirling inside me. For 4 years I tried to explain my research, to share my excitement about the potential applications. Every time I brought it up at dinner, you changed the subject or told me to focus on practical things. Dad's face had gone from pale to red, a flush of embarrassment creeping up his neck. We thought. You thought it was a waste of time, I finished for him. You thought my degree was worthless, my professors were filling my head with nonsense, and my research was just playing around in laboratories. You told me to get a real job, to be practical, to stop dreaming about things that would never amount to anything. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. Around us, other families were heading to cars and restaurants, planning celebrations and taking pictures. The late afternoon sun was starting to sink toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the empty ceremony space. Maya, Mom said finally, her voice small and uncertain. We want to take you to dinner. To celebrate. The country club has a private dining room we could. No, I said, surprised by how calm I felt. Thank you, but no. What do you mean, no? Dad asked, his business instincts kicking in as he tried to regain control of the situation. This is a family celebration. We should be together. I looked at the 3 people who had shaped my entire life, who had provided for me financially but had never truly seen or supported me emotionally. They stood there in their expensive clothes, clutching their designer accessories, looking lost and confused in the face of my success. For 4 years, you made it clear that my work wasn't worth your time or attention, I said, tucking my diploma and research documentation under my arm. You called my degree worthless, my research a waste of time, and my dreams unrealistic. You told me to get a practical job and stop embarrassing the family with my ambitions. We were trying to protect you, Mom protested weakly. We didn't want you to be disappointed if things didn't work out. You weren't protecting me, I replied. You were protecting yourselves from having to admit that maybe, just maybe, I knew what I was doing all along. Marcus stepped forward, his lawyer instincts recognizing a negotiation in progress. Look, Maya, we're family. We stick together, right? Dad has connections in the medical device industry. We could help you navigate the business side of this research grant. The offer was so transparently opportunistic that I almost laughed. The same family that didn't stick together when I was working 3 jobs to pay for school? The same family that suggested I become a paralegal because engineering was too ambitious? That family. Dad's phone buzzed with what was probably another business alert, but for once he ignored it entirely. We made mistakes, he admitted, the words seeming to cost him physical effort. We didn't understand what you were working on. But we're here now. We want to support you. Where were you when I was pulling all-nighters in the laboratory? Where were you when I was presenting my research at conferences? Where were you when I won my first academic award last year? I asked, my voice still calm but growing stronger. You were at Marcus's law firm's social events, his bar exam celebration party, his first case victory dinner. You were there for all of his achievements, even the small ones. But you couldn't be bothered to attend a single one of my academic presentations. The truth hung in the air between us like a physical barrier. 4 years of dismissal, discouragement, and disappointment couldn't be erased by a few minutes of shocked recognition. What do you want us to do? Mom asked, tears starting to form in her eyes. How do we fix this? I looked at her for a long moment, this woman who had given birth to me but had never really seen me. I don't know if you can, I said honestly. This isn't about money or connections or business opportunities. This is about respect. This is about believing in someone you love, even when you don't understand what they're doing. I started walking toward the parking lot where my 10-year-old Honda Civic waited, the car I'd bought used with money from my tutoring jobs, the car they'd always been embarrassed to be seen in. Behind me, I heard them calling my name, but I didn't turn around. Paya, wait. Dad shouted. Let's talk about this. Let's figure out how to move forward. I stopped and turned back to face them one more time. They stood there in a huddle, three successful, wealthy people who suddenly looked very small and uncertain. I'll be spending the next week meeting with research institutions about graduate programs and laboratory access, I said. After that, I'll probably be relocating to whichever university offers the best facilities for my continued research. Relocating. Mom's voice cracked on the word. Johns Hopkins, MIT, Stanford, they're all interested in my work. I'll be choosing based on which program offers the most potential for advancing neural interface technology, not based on which one is closest to home. The implication was clear. They would no longer be the center of my decision-making process. For the first time in my life, I would be choosing my path based on my own goals and values, not on their expectations or convenience. As I walked away from them for the second time, I heard Marcus say to our parents, "Do you realize what we just lost? A $2 million research grant recipient in the family, and we completely blew it." Dad's response was too quiet for me to hear, but I could see him gesturing helplessly as I reached my car. I sat in the driver's seat for a moment, looking back at the graduation ceremony site where my family still stood, probably planning their next move. The late afternoon sun was painting everything golden, making even the ordinary campus buildings look majestic and full of possibility. My phone buzzed with a text message from Dr. Sarah Chin, my thesis advisor. "Congratulations on the research award. I'm so proud of your achievement. Would you like to celebrate with dinner tonight?" "My treat. We have so much to discuss about your future opportunities." I smiled, typing back, "I would love that. Thank you for believing in my work when it mattered most." As I drove away from the campus, heading toward a dinner celebration with someone who had actually supported my dreams, I felt something I'd never experienced before: complete freedom from the need for my family's approval. The $2 million research grant wasn't just funding for my continued work. It was validation that I had been right all along to pursue my passion despite their discouragement. My phone continued buzzing with congratulatory messages from classmates, professors, and research colleagues. But the messages I was most curious about were the ones that hadn't arrived yet. The inevitable calls and texts from my family, once they fully processed what had happened and what it meant for their own futures. Because somewhere in the back of my mind, I suspected this was just the beginning. $2 million was significant, but it was also just the starting point for research that could eventually be worth hundreds of millions in patent royalties and licensing agreements. The neural interface technology I developed wasn't just academically interesting, it was commercially revolutionary. My family had spent 4 years dismissing my worthless degree and urging me toward practical careers. Now they would have to live with the knowledge that they had actively discouraged what would likely become one of the most lucrative and impactful innovations of their generation. And unlike their previous mistakes, this one couldn't be fixed with money, connections, or social manipulation. This one could only be addressed through genuine change, authentic apology, and a fundamental shift in how they viewed and treated me. As I pulled into the restaurant parking lot to meet Dr. Chin, I wondered if they were capable of that kind of transformation. But for the first time in my life, their answer didn't determine my happiness or my future. I had finally learned to value my own opinion of my worth more than theirs. The graduation ceremony was over, but my real education was just beginning.